Mawson, well, we talked quite a bit to the whole group. I guess the one thing that I wanted to hear and that I've been looking to get good indication on is is this primarily a hydrothermal system? And the importance to me there is that structurally, if the mineralization is hydrothermal, then it must have originated presumably at some depth and worked its way up to surface where they've come up with these incredible gold and uranium values. And so given if you have a hydrothermal system and you have the right type of structural settings, you can have contiguous zones of mineralization, and if it even approaches nearly what some of the values have got at that surface, you're going to have multi-million ounce gold, probably some big uranium deposit as well. I don't know if that's more of a problem or a good thing, but nonetheless, if it's so I guess Michael had indicated that from everything they've seen from their surface exploration and now the drilling, initial look at the core and everything else, is that this is clearly a hydrothermal system. They don't quite understand what all the ore controls are, other than that there's a corridor, there's some folding, somehow maybe there's some ways that the rocks have opened up, allowing this the fluids to come from depth or from the side or from wherever, and carried gold and uranium with them, and then deposited into the favorable areas. So and he also mentioned, I guess, that so there's a distinction between the other land. There's some land that's owned. There's some leased land versus some federal land or something. Remember that?
I don't know the exact distinction of why they needed a more robust approval process, but it sounded like what they're applying for now would get them about 30% of the land. So they have 10%, 5-10%, then they get to 30%, and then by the end of the year, 100%.
Yeah. Now I remember, yeah. So there's some designation or a portion of the land that's some kind of EU designation that prevents commercial activity on it or something like that. So I guess
the most desirable. I mean, I don't know if it was clear to me that the most desirable targets were on that 30%. But certainly,
well, some of them were. I mean, so they've sampled a lot.
And the current, land on which they're drilling.
No, I mean the current land they're drilling on is very selective. It's just a private land. I don't think any of the really prospective targets are on there. Sounds like at least several of the targets are on the 30%. I mean, clearly the other 60%, 50% has some of the other ones as well. But so if they can get through this process, I guess they should be able to start drilling later this year on this 30% of the total land package. It's not really. I don't really think land package is how much of
it was a few months behind what they were expecting. I mean, well, I guess they've been told that the process has already been complete, but that's just not happening. So, I think maybe
I think what he was.
July,
I think what
August.
they said is that. Yeah, I think he said the court had told them it should take so long, or whatever the agency that deals with these matters would take so long, but maybe they didn't include the back and forth appeal and then revising your thing and then having to go back and revise it based on comments and all the other stuff that probably happens. I guess they knew that would be something that would take a while to deal with. I think one thing that would be disappointing to find out that the issue, getting the other 60% of the land converted, and that should happen as a matter of procedural, going through the steps and doing it. If there's going to be some sort of very interested party at whatever level, either in the country or just some NGO or some European deal that would strongly oppose on environmental grounds, for that 60%, that would be more disappointing. I don't think this is a deposit because of the uranium that you're really going to be able to because it's about it's about surface disturbance here, I think. So if you can get underground and drill it from underground, it would be a different thing. But I mean, because of the uranium, I don't know if you necessarily have the, even if you know it's high grade, I don't have the option to say, well, we'll just tunnel in there and drill it from underground, and just, because if this is a vein type deposit, especially if it's kind of deep seated, then it could go for significant distances. So the open pit, I mean, if you can do that, and it looks like it's 400 meters wide and it averages several grams per ton gold, that would be very attractive. But if you have to do it from underground, the issue, and this is just me speaking, maybe that could be something. So I do a little bit more work, go talk to them about, okay, what exactly the 60%, is there really, because it sounds like the 30%, yeah, they'll have some appeals, they have to deal with it, some people may not be happy, but it's just a matter of getting through the concerns and doing whatever it takes to allay the objections. But for the other 60%, it may be beyond just procedural. So we'll have to look at that. That's, I guess, further out. But clearly, in terms of the project potential, especially if they come up with something major, to then have to spend a bunch of time to get full access to the entire land position. I mean, I guess that was one thing that was kind of always. I mean, it's Scandinavia. There parts of the land. I guess it's the case anywhere. I mean, you can have like in Nevada, that's a great jurisdiction. But if you're on Forest Service land, then it's in an area that has whatever it is, type of animal, mules or grouse or whatever, the protected thing that people are concerned about. You're going to have some more difficulty. I think you work through the process, but it could take significantly longer, or you may not be able to do exploration during certain times of year. So I guess it's not fair to say, well, Scandinavia, so forget about mining or whatever. But I think it's just procedurally going through it. I mean, certainly, bureaucracy is a big issue there, as I think a lot of other places. But it'll be good to see the first set of holes. He says that there should be hopefully some indication of gold continuing below the surface showings. Well, there's actually not even that many surface showings, I guess, where they're drilling. So if they find some decent gold intercepts underneath a part of the system that doesn't even have a strong surface exposure, I think that would be encouraging. I don't know what they're going to get from, if they drill random, 10 centimeters of 1,000 ounces on a couple of the holes. I don't know. I mean, in this market, I don't know if that would turn things around necessarily. But I think the fact that it's a hydrothermal system, I think it would be way better. Let's say they don't come up with that much gold, or it's pretty variable, but there are structures that they're able to identify when you put all the holes together and you see, oh, here's a vein, hit it here, and then 100 meters over, I'm still hitting the vein, or whatever it is, whatever zone it is, or whatever, and even maybe one's mineralized or both are not mineralized or whatever, but that structure I can trace. So if they can find something, the thing with these this appears to be some kind of folded thing. The thing is they can fold and roll over. So when a fold rolls over, you get this thing that kind of like is all curly around. So when you're drilling through it, you drill through it, and you're like, oh, I don't understand this, because you can't see the folds, right? You may think that you're drilling through different layers, whereas this is the same layer that's folded over on itself. So that's the more difficult thing in terms of trying to understand how that would work. But that's kind of what I would look for, is to see if there's some geological or structural interpretation that could be derived from this first set of holes. Having some gold there as well would be obviously nice. Okay. Did he mention when they might expect to see results?
I don't think we got into that at all.
No. Well, I think if it was imminent, I think he would have mentioned that, so it's probably going to take a while. Oh, no, he did. Okay, we did talk about that. So it says, well, I guess this could be an indication of good news in terms of get the uranium. He said, remember that if it's a certain amount of uranium, the radioactivity is a certain amount, then they have to ship it to a special lab, because Mintech or whoever, that they have a certain level of things they can do there, and then otherwise they have to ship it to Saskatchewan Research Council, because that's obviously where all the high grade uranium from the Athabasca is looked at. Most uranium deposits in the world are pretty darn low grade, so you don't have to worry about 2%, 10%, 50%, or whatever uranium like these guys are going to have. And if they hit some pitch blende or uraninite or something, it's going to be off-scale uranium radioactivity on there. So I guess if it's taking months to do that, to get all the assays back, then maybe it's like, oh yeah, they probably hit quite a bit of uranium. Maybe what they'll do is they'll release those intervals that were able to be assayed, in the labs there, as opposed to being shipped off. That'd be.
They come up with something interesting and they get approval for that other 30%. Worst case, they don't come up with anything.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting for that approval. I mean, the stock's held up fairly well.
Well, no, I mean, one thing that was I think they should have something, because he indicated, hey, we do expect to see visible gold in some of the holes, and he clearly was convinced, or felt really strongly enough to state now that it's definitely a hydrothermal system that has some extension to depth. So those, I think, if you understand what this is. Because look, the other example I had, I mean, he actually didn't know this much about this one that, keep forgetting what the name of the company that we looked at before. Abbott's called. They're in the Otish Mountains in Quebec, around where the Stratico. And that's probably the closest analogy, I think. It's not, I don't think, the same thing. That's much more vein related. But Abbottex, remember, had found these Epsilon and a couple other targets where they had really good gold and uranium values right at surface in sandstone. And then they went underneath it, and then they didn't get anything else. It was just like basically like, it was almost like a skin, or like, some just surface coating. That might have been some high, sort of just a leaching, like a really thin leach cap or something in a sandstone. So they had, I mean, when you looked at some of their surface stuff, you could see little minor, like quartz veinlets or whatever they were, like coated with uraninite, and kind of the golden, like these, and not veins, but at least in some sort of, little veinlets or whatever. So you would assume that wasn't just some, sort of weathering process that had, left remnant high-grade uranium and gold on there because of, upgrading. But, what you really want to see is not see it in these little, along the edges of the vein or whatever. You really want to see big globs of this stuff show up in some structural type setting. But in any case, in that Abbottex thing, they didn't find anything. It's probably just a crust, superficial crust on sandstone. Now, this is not, currently this is not sandstone, that type of situation. The drilling has, I think, from his confidence that this is truly a hydrothermal system that's originated this gold and uranium, to me indicates that there's large potential for just all they need to do is have a structural setting and a trap. And folds are things that tend to develop traps on them. Folds are also things that tend to sometimes, if you get the right types of rocks, can open up things in a way in the rock that creates continuity. So that's really the keys there. Okay, let's move on to the next one.